Good evening, friends. Online students, please confirm if I am audible. Please type yes if I am audible. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for confirming. So, please shut your eyes for a moment. Chaliye. So we begin with a quick recap of what we had studied in the last class. Pass on the mic to somebody. Yes. Please tell me, beta, what did we study yesterday?
Hello.
Yes.
So we studied Renaissance and Enlightenment and French Revolution and its impact in society and Industrial Revolution.
So tell me, how did the French and Industrial Revolutions contribute to the emergence of sociology?
French and Industrial Revolution, they both contributed to modernization of society. First we'll start with French Revolution, its effective in society. It has challenged the authority of church.
Yes.
And give three ideologies: fraternity, modernity, and equality, which are still prevailing in modern world.
Which three words did you use? Fraternity?
Liberty, fraternity, and equality.
Correct, correct.
And these are still popular in world. And
What other changes were brought about as a result of the French Revolution? Did you revise?
yes, sir.
Then tell. Don't look up your notes. Pass on the mic and be better prepared tomorrow. Pass on the mic to somebody else. Huh? What was the Industrial Revolution all about?
The revolution was, the industrial revolution.
You don't need a mic वैसे. है ना? हाँ. Fine, fine. Pass on the baton. Yes. Tell me, how did Renaissance impact European society, and what is its linkage with the emergence of sociology? Yes? Speak, beta. It's working. It is working? Speak now then. Pass it on to the next person then. Yes. Tell us about the Renaissance quickly. It was? Be closer to the mic. Yeah. Keep mic closer.
It was the rebirth period in European culture.
Okay.
Thinkers like Rousseau, they were thought in front of society, which led to French Revolution.
Pass on the mic. Is he correct?
No, sir. Rousseau, other philosophers, they studied in Enlightenment era.
Correct. So what was the Renaissance about? That was not correct, beta. What you just said.
It is a rebirth and rebirth of the existing knowledge.
Okay.
And many developed with there, like in art and culture, and many discoveries were there that time.
Okay. Pass on the mic. What was the... Yes, hold it. You can't refuse to take the mic. Take the mic. And tell me what was the commercial revolution and the scientific revolutions around that time. What were they about? Yes? Where is the mic? Raise your hand. Speak up. Speak up. Quickly, beta. Just do dhak dhak to the mic. It might work. Yes, speak now. Hello? Akash, dekho mic. Haan. Yes, try speak. It was clear. Pass on the mic to him. Meanwhile, somebody from the front. Yes, blue t-shirt. Tell me, what was the Renaissance about?
So basically the commercial revolution and
आकाश आप माइक को देखो ठीक होना चाहिए हाँ
commercial revolution and scientific revolution were two chief incidents which happened. So in the commercial revolution, starting from the Vasco da Gama and Columbus, they found new sea routes which led to commercialization and trade. And along with that, in the scientific revolution, we can say that the evolved scientists such as Galileo Galilei, Newton, those people brought various discoveries, and the temperament of scientific approach came into picture, where the power of the churches began denting, and a new scientific approach came in, and there were three chief characteristics such as humanism, realism, and empiricism.
very good thank you yes look up yes you tell me what was the Enlightenment about all right thank you what was the social contract theory you look mighty bored huh? And the class has not even begun what was the social contract theory very briefly yes and come better prepared yeah
As Locke had written in his book Leviathan,
Hobbes
Hobbes, okay, as Hobbes had written in his book Leviathan, that is, social contract refers, first of all, he described the state of nature as in his imaginary form to such where there was a state without any government. Social contract, in short, it refers when people, when people gather, during that time with by surrendering their rights, and therefore from the group
So basically that it talks about the emergence of state power.
And the government.
Absolutely, good. So what was the implication of the social contract theory? Yes. What was the implication of, yeah. It challenged the divine theory or basis of the monarchical rule. Absolutely. Then we talked about what? What was Adam Smith's writings about? Let him. Yes, Adam Smith, what was he writing about? Did not revise? Then tell. You have to, when you revise, the purpose is to try to remember so that you can recall. If you can't recall the next day, you have to recall this content 1 year hence, more than 1 year later in the mains exam. You will of course have more opportunities to revise also, but at least, if you are advised like 2 revisions immediately after the class, the purpose is at the very least you should be able to recall the next day. Okay? What did I ask you? Adam Smith. Tell me, beta. Yeah, what did he write in The Wealth of Nations? You weren't there? Okay, yesterday. Okay, fine. Yes, tell me. What do you mean by laissez-faire? Free market economy without government interference. Fine. And this led to, or this provided the moral basis for free market economics or industrial capitalism. Absolutely. Liberalization is like, we refer in the context of, the opening up of the economy to global participants, which happened in India, say in 1990s and all. So that's a very different context. The premise is same. The premise is same, that free market economics, but it's a very different context, okay, in which we talk about liberalization. So that is that. And I think that is what we had covered. What was this thing? Were there any social issues being written about or discussed thousands of years ago? Bitya.
Early 19th century, sociology as a discipline emerged, but it was written long back by Cordelia and all.
Who are and all? Name some, pepper your answer with scholars, philosophers, even in the actual answer sheet. Who else apart from Kautilya? One name she has rightly used from the ancient philosophers. Kautilya and Chanakya, they're the same guy. Okay? Then don't say Vishnu Gupta also. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, ऐसे 2-4 तो अपने किटी में होने चाहिए, right? ठीक है, हाँ. So please continue. Okay.
Thing is, the changes which came in the Europe, it was quite, it was not, the earlier philosophers were not given adequate knowledge about that. So,
Fine. Granted, good. Thank you. Chaliye. Doubts, please. Any doubts the online students have, please ask. Any doubts any of the online students, please ask. Don't feel discriminated against, okay? It's just because, they feel discriminated against otherwise. Any of the online students, any doubts? So they are quite doubt-free. Don't cross-talk, please. Can we have the chit-chat outside? So any doubts, guys? Yes, brother. Theirs is quite different, and we don't frankly need to get into it. Reason being, because this is not a philosophy, this thing. You will never be asked, nor have you ever been asked, what was the social contract theory of a Hobbes or a Locke or a Rousseau. It was only illustrative to kind of capture the spirit of the Enlightenment period, or how it challenged the prevailing notions of say the basis of political power, etc. Since you have asked, I'll just give you a brief insight. Rousseau also employed this notion of a state of nature, a pre-government existence. But according to him, the state of nature was pretty happy. I'm using like crude language, not his language, so that you can understand. If Hobbes saw state of nature as being one of unhappiness in general, Rousseau termed it as one of uncorrupted morals. So there were no rules and regulations, but there was some inner kind of, compass that prevented us from killing each other. So we were living in a state of kind of, blissful ignorance and harmony, something like that. So according to him, the social contract was of a very different kind. Some smartass basically, he deceived the people in that egalitarian society, and he emerged as a chief, something of the sort. Okay, but that is not our concern as far as sociology is concerned. Yes?
Sir, as you told yesterday, like French was divided into French society, clergy, nobles, and commoners. So we have read that nobles were divided into nobles of swords and nobles of robes. These were like those who do the good works from the third level, the commoners, they used to go up. So, was there any mobility or not? Because you said that there was a class divide.
Any mobility in the estate system was very limited, should one say, right? What it was replaced by, which is the industrial class structure, was characterized by far greater mobility, okay, than what was prevalent in the estate system, which was, incidents of mobility would be few and far in between. Yes? Yes?
A lot of thinkers have used the term man that I asked you in the theories and all. So how do we use that or explain that in the answers without actually offending the
Feminazis. So his question is, a lot of thinkers have used the word man while writing. So how do we use that without offending a very committed feminist or whatever? It is very accepted practice in the social sciences to use the word man in a generic manner, okay, referring to the humankind in general, or mankind if you may permit, okay. And if you were to write man and woman or men and women, that will consume unnecessarily extra space, which is anyways very limited in the answer sheet. So you have to take a very practical approach, leave your feminist ideology aside and let it be. Okay? And you won't be penalized for it. You won't be penalized for it, since that was the crux, I think, your main concern. Okay, so please feel very free to write man for humanity in general. Yeah. Yes, we will be discussing that today. In fact, we'll be quoting Zetlin also. Yes.
Sir, as Voltaire said, if there was no God, the ruling class would be one.
Would create one.
So what does that mean? Actually, I didn't get the idea.
He meant that if there were no notion of divinity, the ruling classes would create one because their interests are served by organized religion. So in a way he was questioning the notion or the very existence of God, and also alongside highlighting how religion is kind of hands in glove with the powers that be. Are you with me? Basically it tantamounts to saying that religion and state are in bed together. They serve each other's interests. Any other? Any other? Yes? You're saying, can we say the caste system and slavery are similar systems? By and large, sociologists would disagree with that comparison, considering slavery to be a much more, bluntly put, worse kind of or a harsher kind of a system, right, than the caste system. the two systems emerged in very different social contexts. Having said that, let me complete. Having said that, Ambedkar wrote, and very clearly, that untouchability, which is an integral part of the caste system, is worse than slavery. He said in slavery there is still hope of a slave becoming free. But there is no escaping untouchability if you are born an untouchable. After Ambedkar, okay, the Dalit movement, there have been strains which have tried to forge linkages with the civil rights movement in the USA, including till today. There is a young Dalit scholar by the name of Suraj Yengde. He is trying to, kind of sustain that linkage between the civil rights movement of the blacks in USA and the Dalit mobilization in India. So, for instance, recently, few years back, you may have heard of the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Following that, there was a hashtag Dalit Lives Matter. Also, kind of. So, there is that some comparison which is drawn by certain inclinations, though not very widely accepted. Okay? Yes. And we'll study more about this in paper 2. Yes.
Can we say that the definition given by Comte about sociology about society, that it is an organism possessing harmony of structure and function, was applicable to the earlier Hindu society because inequality was reached there, it was imparted there, it was practiced also, but now it is not applicable?
See, this Comte's, that statement basically belongs to what is called the functionalist school, or the functional view of society, seeing society primarily as, integrated, harmonious, etc. To those who belong to that school, contemporary society, contemporary Indian society can also be seen as harmonious and integrative. So we don't necessarily say that, earlier Hindu society was like that, but it is not anymore.
Now we have constitution which is teaching egalitarian society. So we can say that there is a conflict between what is what is practice.
I didn't understand your question.
So I'm saying that now we have constitution which is like striving us for a egalitarian society.
Yes.
But still we find some like notions where atrocities have been committed on the like marginalized class.
So from a functional perspective, one could argue that those exploitation or oppressions, these are somewhat, not the norm. By and large, the Indian society continues to be held together by a strong glue. We remain united despite our differences, despite divisions, inequalities and exploitations. So that is how a functionalist would interpret the current Indian society. And there is a very strong functionalist school in Indian sociology and anthropology also. A lot of people who subscribe to it. Yes. Yes.
Sir, can you say that the Renaissance period is a bridge between the Dark Ages and the modern times?
Yes, we can, definitely. So the question is, can we consider the Renaissance to be a bridge between the Dark Ages and the modern times? Absolutely in agreement with that assessment.
Sir, there was a previous question about how modernity led to the emergence of the sociology. Sir, in that question, what we actually should write? We should write about the French Revolution, Industrial Revolution and all this.
So he's asking that there was previously a question asked. Repeat the question. How modernity led to the emergence of sociology. So what all we have to write in that? In such a question, you will be writing about the rise of the modern society after the French and Industrial Revolutions. You will also be mentioning the impact of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, because that whole package led to the birth of modern society. Huh?
Basically, sir, we have to write all.
Yes, all these. Huh?
What is the actual definition of the modernity?
Yes. So the question asked is, how would modern society or modernity be defined? It is a particular type of society which emerged in Europe at a particular point in its history, which is after the French and Industrial Revolutions. Modern society is that which is characterized by a certain kind of living arrangements, namely a large-sized population, an industrial capitalist economy, secularization or decline of religion in modern in society, decline in the importance of religion, urban living, right, and mass-based education, mass media, mass transportation, and the like.
But these were the changes due to the industrial revolution.
Yes, so modern society came about as a result of the industrial and French revolutions. Huh? Yes. Last question. Yeah. So we also have had our own experience of modernity. The question is why modernity occurred first in Europe and not, say, in Indian society. That question has been analyzed variously by different scholars. One interpretation is that, when we had our encounter with modernity, it was mediated by colonialism. So it was with the advent of the European powers in India and them taking a political control that India was introduced to the forces of modernity. So our modernity was somewhat imposed from above. In contrast, in Europe, there was a long drawn period of preparation for the acceptance and wider kind of impact of modernity. So during long drawn period of Renaissance and Enlightenment, the European society was literally prepared for the changes that were to be brought about as a result of the French and industrial revolutions. In contrast, we simply didn't have that process. So the masses remained by and large illiterate, by and large mired in, say, superstition and ignorance. Religion continues to play an important part even in contemporary modern Indian society. Religion which took, say, comparing with the West, it took a back seat. Right? So our experience has been very different. Some would blame, some like Weber, okay, he would blame or should say attribute it to the religious philosophy. So the Hindu religious philosophy, according to Weber, does not kind of encourage adaptation to change. It is somewhat, regressive in that sense. In the sense it leads to perpetuation of the existing arrangements. But in the West, there was this Protestant Christianity, which kind of itself became a basis of economic and technological change. This we will be understanding as we, proceed in the syllabus and get acquainted with Weber, get acquainted with aspects of our society. Chaliye, moving on with your kind permission. So we had discussed all this. You want to write? Write. Give a subheading, Emergence of Sociology, continued. For lack of a better heading. In the sense we had last written about the French and industrial revolutions, we continue from there. Emergence of Sociology, continued. European society underwent a centuries-long period of preparedness for transformative changes, that were to be brought about by the French and industrial revolutions. During that were to be brought about by the French and industrial revolutions during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods. Full stop. During Renaissance, art, literature, and science all flourished. Full stop. Literally meaning rebirth. The Renaissance period was marked by the scientific revolution and the commercial revolution. The scientific revolution marked a clear break from the past. A clear break from the past. Science became the new source of knowledge. Science became the new source of knowledge. For example, knowledge about the human body was obtained through dissection. Dissection. Full stop. Thus, a scientific approach to nature, human body, and society became prevalent. The commercial revolution led to expansion of trade, emergence of the company as a form of organization, and growth of the banking industry. Full stop. Importantly, are you able to keep pace with my speed of dictation? Ask thy neighbor.
Sir, you should call banking industry or institution?
Industry. What was the last thing we wrote? Importantly, it led to the emergence, we are talking about the commercial revolution, huh? It led to the emergence of a middle class. It led to the emergence of a middle class which would provide leadership to the European revolutions several centuries later, meaning the French and Industrial Revolutions. Huh? Next para. The Renaissance period was characterized by humanism, realism, and empiricism. Dash features which also got reflected in early sociology. Full stop. Renaissance was marked by a new attitude. Marked by a new attitude. Have we written this attitude thing? New attitude towards man, nature, and society. Full stop. All of these became the subjects of keen observation and experiment. Full stop. Particularly, the Renaissance led to the discovery and popular use and increased use of the scientific method. Full stop. The scientific method with its emphasis on experimentation and mathematization, or simply the use of mathematics. Experimentation and the use of mathematics. The scientific method with its emphasis on experimentation and the use of mathematics came to be regarded as the most accurate. Full stop. When sociology emerged as a new discipline, see from the neighbor, whatever you've missed, and carry on. Otherwise, you'll miss more. When sociology emerged in the 19th century, its founding fathers also emphasized the use of the same scientific method. Also emphasized the use of the same scientific method. All right. So this is about, we have written only about the Renaissance. Huh? Then move on. The Enlightenment period, next para, the Enlightenment period led to intense intellectual ferment in Europe. Intense intellectual ferment in Europe. Full stop. Philosophers of the era wrote extensively challenging long established notions. Challenging long established notions. Full stop. Thus, the Enlightenment era embodied a spirit of new awakening in Europe. The age of reason marked a radical change. From the traditional thinking in feudal Europe. Full stop. Intellectuals started questioning almost each and every aspect of life. Nothing was sacrosanct. Sacrosanct means, something which cannot be questioned or beyond any criticism or doubting. Something which cannot be touched. Nothing was sacrosanct. Be it the authority of the church, or even the very notion of God. Be it, comma डाल के, be it The authority of the monarch. The authority of the monarch, or the nature of his relationship with the people. Full stop. Enlightenment scholars considered that human beings are essentially rational. Human beings are essentially rational. And the society can be built on rational principles. Can be built on rational principles. Last paratype. Not only did the Enlightenment era writings, not only did the Enlightenment era writings facilitate the occurrence of the French and industrial revolutions, comma, या semicolon if you know how to use it. It also had a more direct bearing on early sociology. A more direct bearing on early sociology. Okay? If you want to quickly read through it and see if you understand it, it's basically what we've discussed primarily. Okay? The Renaissance was primarily a cultural kind of a movement, okay, or a period characterized by developments in the realm of culture, while Enlightenment was primarily an intellectual kind of a movement. Shall we proceed? Chaliye, now give a subheading: intellectual influences on early sociology. Intellectual influences on early sociology. What do you mean by intellectual influences, friends? Basically, what kind of thought patterns were prevalent, what kind of ideas existed which had a strong imprint on the writings of the early sociologists. What kind of intellectual currents got reflected in the writings of the early sociologists? That is what we are trying to understand. So what kind of an intellectual climate existed that time which would have a bearing on the writings of the founding fathers? So what was the intellectual climate? You already know, very frankly. We will just discuss it here in a more systematic manner. Tell me, what was broadly the intellectual climate? Yes? The scientific method. The questioning was there. Yeah? The emphasis on empirical data, yes? individualism, basically the whole Enlightenment thing. Yeah. In fact, some scholars contend that sociology arose as a discipline primarily, like he was saying, he was asking, as a reaction to the Enlightenment. So the discipline did emerge in the intellectual context laid by the Enlightenment. And during the Enlightenment, what all streams, developments or writings influence sociology, we discuss at some length. What is your sense? Which discipline had a very strong influence on early sociology? During that period, that discipline was on an ascent. It was, making strides or huge developments. It was being great. Which science? Yes? Biology, absolutely. So one very strong influence was from the field of biology. In biology, what was that development? Darwin's writings. Darwin's theory of evolution. You know it all. It is exactly what, Aurobindo had said. He said knowledge lies dormant in the student. The task of the teacher is only to awaken it. So you know it all. My task is only to, tap you and figure out, make you discover what lies within. So one very strong influence was of biology, particularly Darwin's writings, Charles Darwin's. From biology, early sociology imbibed two important things. Charles Darwin, his writings had a strong got reflected in the writings of Herbert Spencer. Let me put it this way. Herbert Spencer was a sociologist. He was a contemporary of Auguste Comte. He is also a French fellow. In fact, his writings are known as social Darwinism. Social Darwinism. Applying Darwinism or Darwin's theory to society. So from biology, we as a discipline or early sociology as reflected in the writings of Spencer Bhai, we took two things very importantly. One of which we have already discussed, which is what? Yes, the organic analogy or comparing the society to an organism. What Comte had also said, society is like an organism possessing harmony of structure and function. So this view, what we call the organic analogy, analogy means comparison. This organic analogy or comparing society to an organism was a gift of or an inspiration from biology. So like the biologists study an organism as interlinked parts, so do we in sociology, or early sociologists did the same. They studied society as comprising of interconnected parts. They didn't study the social institutions in isolation, but as interconnected with each other. One, we took the organic analogy, and the other was the concept of evolution. The concept of evolution. What is evolution in biology? Anybody? Survival of the fittest. And what more? What is evolution exactly? Change. Can we elaborate what kind of change is evolution? I am alive today, I die tomorrow, that is change. Is that evolution? What is evolution? Adaptation to the natural environment. Okay.
Like a species got transformed.
Yes, from what to what? From simple, small-sized, undifferentiated or homogeneous type to large-sized, complex, differentiated kind of an entity. Simply we all life started off as single-cell amoebas, then kept on getting more and more complex, And then we have complex like, organisms like human beings or elephants today. That is evolution. The same evolutionary schema or model was applied to society. Society started off as small-sized, simple, undifferentiated, homogeneous, primitive groups, like say a tribal society. And with passage of time, it keeps on getting more complex and advanced. So from tribal society to a relatively more complex feudal agrarian society, and then finally to the even more complex modern industrial capitalist kind of a society. Right? What we call social evolution or the evolution of society. So from biology, early sociology was hugely impacted, particularly employing or taking from it the organic analogy, comparing society to an organism, meaning a set of interrelated parts, and secondly, the notion of evolution. Are we clear? Secondly, which other discipline? No. History. Yes, history it is. And what did we learn from history? Unique events. That would be from who onwards? Weber onwards. We are talking about early sociology. Don't throw big words like culture at me. So you pick up whatever you want to from culture. What culture? From history, the discipline of sociology or early sociology, no. So the discipline or early sociology picked up the notion of historical types or social types. The concept that society passes through certain historical stages, or each historical period is characterized by a particular social type. Social types क्या होते हैं? For example, you had in the ancient period primitive society, in medieval period feudal society, modern period industrial society. So this concept of social types. Also appreciate, how do we understand the present society? If we have to understand today's society, do we only look at today's conditions? Yes. So today, the way we are, it is because where we have started off from. So if we have to understand today's conditions, we have to kind of trace our journey from the past. Scholars like, one second. Saint Pierre, and I'll scare you now. This guy, Guillaume Battista, they basically, developed these concept of historical types. We don't like him already. And this notion of historical types affected the writings in sociology of the great Karl Marx, even Comte. Comte also developed a, model of social evolution through different stages, historical stages. Or Herbert Spencer for that matter. Okay? Yes? Social types means that at a particular point in human history, a distinct kind of a society exists. So in the ancient period, what existed was termed as, say, the primitive society or the tribal society, which was in terms of its characteristics very different, qualitatively different from the kind of society which existed during the medieval period, which was the feudal agrarian society, which is qualitatively very different from what exists during the modern period, which is the industrial society. That is what we call social types. These are different social types. Social types simply meaning types of society. Yeah? So we got from history, learned from history the notion of social types, this notion of dividing society, or studying it through various historical time periods. Also, what we got from history? Data. So, early sociologists frequently relied upon the data supplied by historians. So, how do we know what kind of society existed 500 years back? Who will tell us? The historians would. Their studies, their analysis, their data. Another overarching, overwhelmingly in your face kind of an influence was the scientific method or approach. The sciences, whether biology or physics, chemistry, they were reigning at that time. They were, scientific knowledge came to acquire a very high social status as such. Scientists acquired a very high social status. So the early sociologists, they also sought to adopt the methodology, the approach of science. So early sociology, whether in the writings of a Comte or a Marx or a Durkheim, employed which approach? The scientific approach. The scientific approach, emphasis on empirical data, rationality, was an outcome of the Enlightenment period and was a very strong influence on early sociology. Another important influence that was visible in the writings of early sociologists was the notion of progress or the perfectibility of social institutions. The notion of progress and perfectibility of social institutions. What do you mean by progress? Improvement, right? That things are getting better. Not just simple to complex, but in that theory of evolution, there is inherent a notion of progress. Please appreciate. In other words, in that evolutionary scheme, when we talk of society moving from, say, tribal to feudal to industrial, or as some scholars would call it, Lewis Henry Morgan, he used the terms savagery to barbarism to civilization. Or Comte used the terms theological to metaphysical to scientific stage. There is inherent a notion of progress. In other words, each subsequent stage or a later stage is considered as somewhat better than a previous stage, more evolved, more advanced, and therefore somewhat better than a previous stage. In other words, this evolutionary view considered that there is an improvement or progress, whether it is technological, economic, or social. Now, why this came about? Please appreciate, in the sciences, in physics and bio, there had been very impressive developments. So it was contended, say with the Industrial Revolution, if production process could be improved to such greater degree, from producing single-handedly like one item each, and now mass production, quantum jump in production, significant technological improvements. If we can improve the economy far better, or the production system, if we can improve or increase the human lifespan with advancements in biology and medicine, then why can't we create safer cities, more integrated communities, more stable families? In other words, this notion of progress or perfectibility of things was also applied to the social realm, to the social institutions. Are you with me? Basically, the period had witnessed very impressive strides in various fields. And that kind of inspired early sociologists to seek the same kind of progress or nearing perfection when it came to human communities and social institutions. The pauses, so you can write. Sorry? Yes, there was this feeling or this understanding that societies can be perfected, made better, and there can be social change for the better. So it is clearly seen as a positive social change. So there was this dual tendency. His question is that this sounds prescriptive, but early sociology was largely descriptive. So how do you, reconcile the two? So what I am trying to tell him is, or all of you, that sociology did have that dual character, right? So on the one hand, for example, Comte, the founding father, on the one hand, he talks about sociology being purely scientific. On the other hand, he does talk about what is the purpose for which the new science is to serve. For him, it is to know, to predict, to control. Okay, so it has that dual character. Another important influence was the social survey method. The social survey method. Social survey is what? Go to a population, seek information, and collect quantifiable data. Normal survey, have you seen any surveys, participated in any surveys? It could be any goddamn thing. There are dime a dozen. Okay. Social surveys became the main, please don't talk. Social surveys became the main way through which information was gathered. Social surveys became the main way through which large-scale information was gathered. Regarding different aspects of social life. And this was particularly after F.M. Eden's State of the Poor report. F.M. Eden's State of the Poor report. This report, basically it was a social survey which inspired many more. And thereafter, social surveys became one of the primary ways for the discipline to collect data and conduct research. Now, what did this imply? Please appreciate. Before this Enlightenment period and the beginning of social surveys, social problems like poverty, how were they analyzed or understood? How were they explained? What was the cause of, say, any social problem, say poverty? Yes, so as divine will. So whether it is poverty, death, disease, epidemic, it was either attributed to divine will or nature. But now these social surveys, they suggested a new approach to solving social problems. Please write down. The social surveys gained popularity as a way to collect empirical data regarding various social problems. Regarding various social problems. Full stop. Thus, social problems began to be seen as not divine or natural, but as man-made. Man-made. All right? Which can be studied and analyzed by quantification. Another important influence was counter-enlightenment thought. Counter-enlightenment thought. Guys, any social surveys which are conducted in our society before we go to counter-enlightenment? Yes, the census, the biggest of them all, right? And what kind of information does that collect? Is it of any use for sociologists? The census, what? What kind of information does it supply to us? Sex ratio, migration information, literacy rates, a wealth of information, friends, about so many aspects of our life. So many. So Indian sociology and anthropology greatly rely upon data from the census. I'm showing you a practical application how these social surveys can be used for our purposes. For example, if we have to analyze whether the joint family is disintegrating, we are undergoing that process of, urbanization, industrialization. Is it really breaking down? Where do we get quantifiable data? How many people or couples are living in a family from the census? So government has introduced, say, a Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Has it really impacted the child sex ratio? How do we know? Thanks to the census. Yes or no? Any other surveys that are conducted apart from the census? The National Family Health Survey, the NSSO conducts a lot of surveys, so many. चलिए, हाँ, the counter enlightenment thought. See, when enlightenment took place, okay, enlightenment was all about progress, change, rationality, science. Yes or no? These were the defining themes of enlightenment. But this also made some scholars, intellectuals uneasy. Scholars like de Bonald and de Maistre, with a small d. It's not a printing mistake, that's how they write. Bade log badi baatein. So, scholars like de Bonald and de Maistre, they represented currents of counter-enlightenment thought, meaning they opposed the Enlightenment project. But what is there to oppose? Isn't it all nice? Sugar and spice and all things nice? Really? Progress, rationality, science, what is there to oppose? Tell me, were there any negative consequences of the Enlightenment project? Traditional what? Yes. Yes, so why is it problematic? See, according to scholars like de Bonald and de Maistre, their opposition to the Enlightenment stemmed from seeing it as a source of chaos, instability, disorder, uncertainty in society. For them, this is what Enlightenment represented. Are you with me? So they basically championed restoring the old order. Let us, restore the powers of the church or the privileges of the feudal lords. Let us bring back monarchy. Why? Because it is a stable, continuous form of government and, social life that we are well aware of. Change can be disturbing, right? So the counter-enlightenment thought also resisted that change, saw it as a destabilizing force, and basically, wanted the restoration of order and stability in society. Now, did this stream also influence early sociology? See, early sociology was, characterized by that dualistic character. On the one hand, Enlightenment influence was clearly there, in the sense that yearning for progress, that notion of evolution, that was clearly visible in the writings of the early sociologists. But on the other, the counter-Enlightenment thought also got reflected in the writings of several of the early sociologists. So, many of the founding fathers, they were also kind of, quite similar to the counter-Enlightenment philosophers. They were also seeking order and stability in society. For example, when we proceed further, one of the founding fathers, Durkheim, he talked about or developed this concept of anomy. Anomy basically, or very roughly for now, means chaos and disorder in society. He was also writing about how when society changes from traditional to modern, there is that period of instability and chaos. And what can be the possible solutions? So, early sociology did reflect that dual kind of a character. On the one hand, seeking progress, rationality, and furthering of the scientific Enlightenment project. On the other, concerned with order and stability, like the counter-enlightenment thought. Yes. Concept of? Can't hear you, be louder. Anomy. Okay, the word anomy, it's coined by Durkheim. Used by Durkheim, sorry. This concept of anomy is used by Durkheim, one of the early sociologists, one of the founding fathers. It means basically chaos and disorder in society. So Durkheim basically writes that when society changes from traditional to modern society, there is a period of chaos and disorder which he terms as anomy. We'll be discussing it at some greater length when we discuss Durkheim. But for now, just this much, I'm trying to show you how the concern for order and stability, reflected in the writings of the counter-enlightenment scholars, got reflected in the writings of the early sociologists. Right? So Zetlin, in his book, Ideology and Development of Sociological Theory, who's Zetlin? Irving Zetlin, in his book, Ideology and Development of Sociological Theory, writes that early sociology developed as a reaction to enlightenment. This is about the intellectual influences on early sociology. The kind of questions you get, okay, we'll also be discussing one more thing now, which is the development of sociology in America. The kind of questions you get from this emergence of sociology portion, a couple of kinds, you'll also be writing some of them on the weekend, but I'll just share, one is, how did the French and Industrial Revolution contribute to the emergence of emergence of sociology? Second, how is emergence of sociology linked to the modernization of Europe? How are the two questions different, these two? Are they different or are they same content? Same or different? Different. What is the difference? Yes, in the second one, when it says modernization of Europe, you'll also be talking about the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, all of them combinedly, the scientific revolutions, the French and Industrial Revolution, all of them combinedly led to the modernization of Europe. In the first question, you primarily talk only about French and Industrial Revolutions, right? A third question could be intellectual influences on sociology. Once they asked, though it is out of syllabus, development of sociology in America. So we'll now discuss that. Okay, because the syllabus clearly states modernization of Europe and emergence of sociology. But in its wisdom, UPSC has asked, so we shall abide. Perfectibility means there was this increasing feeling that things can be perfected or made far better than what they are, like we had done with technology. So we have been using tools and implements, human beings or societies, European society had been using tools and implements since ages. But the Industrial Revolution period saw a far superior kind of tools and technologies being employed. It was as if they have been nearly perfected. The different types of economic models had been followed, including trade, barter, whatnot. And now the industrial capitalism or the market model, okay, that seemed in several ways far superior to what existed earlier. Right? A far more, say, efficient way of distribution of resources. Right? So, in medical science, there had been a lot of advancement. So this feeling developed that even social institutions and arrangements can be perfected, made far better, right? So that was the idea. Why can't we have, say, crime-free communities or urban areas? Something like that. Yes.
Can we say counter-enlightenment scholars also influenced by the enlightenment?
Sorry? Counter-enlightenment thought was also a product of the enlightenment. Absolutely. Absolutely correct there. So had there been no enlightenment, there would have been no counter-enlightenment. Chaliye, moving ahead to the development of sociology in the land of dreams and destruction, America. Please make note from Nitin Sangwan. Nitin Sangwan, the new edition, Emergence of Sociology, you can read now page numbers 3 to 10. Or the old edition, page number 3 to 9. Sorry? Page number 3 to 9 or 3 to 10. It will be very evident, like, where is Emergence of Sociology. Just read that from Sangwan. It's not there in Harlambos, so you read it from the Sangwan. Okay? Sorry? Chaliye, moving on to Emergence of Sociology in USA. First things first. When we talk about emergence of sociology in USA, we need to be quite clear of the fact that there was no independent development of sociology in USA, as it were. In fact, the development of the discipline in US was heavily influenced by the developments in Europe. In other words, American sociologists borrowed heavily, were inspired heavily by the writings by sociologists in Europe. So the founding fathers, or the, Janmabhoomi, fatherland of sociology is Europe. Some academic developments took place in USA, but the intellectual developments took place in Europe. Let us put it like that. Okay? Now, when did sociology emerge in USA? What did we learn earlier? If you remember, some scholars, some years. What happened in 75? First course titled Sociology was started in America by William Graham Sumner. Then 1892, what happened? The first department of sociology by Albion Small. Then in 1895, the first journal of sociology in USA by Small again. Right? So these are some academic milestones. But what was the... two things. One is that American sociology largely followed or was inspired by the developments in Europe. Secondly, the socio-political climate in America also had some bearing on the development of the discipline. I said two things till now. One is that the development of socio in USA was heavily influenced by the developments in Europe. Secondly, the socio-political climate then in US also had some bearing on the discipline. Now, what was the socio-political climate of that time? 1861 to 65. America witnessed a very bloody and messy civil war. Civil war means basically internal strife between, segments of the population. Like something what is happening in Sri Lanka, tearing the country apart from within. In other words, now I'm not getting into the history of the Civil War or what it was really. For our purposes, suffice to say that American society that time had undergone a lot of chaos, instability, and disorderliness. So the society was in the throes of change. It was changing very rapidly. It was in this context that the first developments in American sociology took place. For instance, in 1865, the American Social Science Association was established. American Social Science Association. And then the other things 1875, Sumner started the first course. Small started the first journal in 1895. We've discussed this earlier as well, or mentioned in passing, if not discussed. Another important development was the Chicago School. A group of sociologists together, basically researching, teaching at the University of Chicago. They were termed as the Chicago School. Some prominent members were Robert Park, George Herbert Mead, William Thomas, Burgess, Zananike. Park, Burgess, G.H. Mead, William Thomas, some members of the Chicago School. First let me teach, then ask if it remains. Now this Chicago emerged as a very important center for, sociological output, teaching, research. Say 1890 to about 1920, 30, 1935 tak. Why particularly Chicago? Because Chicago was a very rapidly urbanizing area. Its population was increasing at a very fast rate. About 1890 to 1920, 30, 35. The Chicago School became an important center for American sociology during this period. Reason being, Chicago city was urbanizing, its population expanding very rapidly. So a lot of, concerns of sociology, they could be analyzed there. Like the growth of slums, industrial conflict, crime rates were high. So criminology developed. So basically Chicago city provided a natural setting for sociological experiments and research. You want to study crime? Come to Chicago. You want to study slums and poverty? Come to Chicago. right? A lot of urban studies like Park, Burgess, urban sociology picked up. Urban sociology, they would basically study the city patterns. In the sense, where do the rich live in a city? Where do the poor or the working class live? Where do the destitutes live? Where do the middle classes live? Where is the commuter zone? Where people travel and all. Many things. There would be gangs. So gang behavior if you want to study. People from different racial backgrounds, for instance. So if you are interested in studying gangs of Latinos or Negroes or whoever. Now, holding it there and going to the early years. A very important role in the development of socio in America was played by Sumner. William Graham Sumner, his philosophy, his thought was greatly influenced by Herbert Spencer. Sumner was heavily influenced by Spencer's writings in Europe. Sumner was influenced by Spencer, Herbert Spencer. What was Herbert Spencer's approach? The concept of social evolution, social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, all that. Now tell me, put on your thinking caps and tell me, this kind of an approach, this kind of an approach, that society evolves, becomes better. This will be supported by, and the notion of survival of the fittest. This kind of a theory will be supported by which segments of the society, the rich or the poor? Why rich? They are the fittest. Very aptly and briefly put, they are the fittest. So basically it justifies their privilege as being a result of fitness, as it were. Absolutely. So it was not the poor but the privileged sections of the society who were supportive of social Darwinism of Sumner in USA. The propertied, well-to-do sections of the society, the wealthy, they were supportive of the social evolutionary approach of Sumner Bhai in USA. Sorry? Yes. And see, this social evolution approach basically was in sync with laissez-faire economic model or free market economics. The social Darwinism of Sumner, Spencer basically championed a free market economics. In other words, government should not interfere unnecessarily in the economy. It should let the, social evolution run its course. It should allow market forces free play. And those who are fit will survive. It will be efficient, it will be optimal. Yes. It could be argued that way, but when we talk about government intervention, it is primarily from the context of protecting the interests of those who are neglected by the market mechanism, the poor, the disprivileged. So it is more about, Abba Modi will never say, I am doing this for Adani or Ambani. right? The fact that he may do so in actual policy is quite another matter. But the matter here is of principle. Should the governments be intervening? And when we say governments intervene, it is assumed or it is kind of understood that it is on behalf of the weak, the disprivileged. Okay? So the point is that Sumner Spencer's social evolutionary approach, which was in sync with free market economic model, was supported by the privileged sections of the society in America. This approach championed no or minimal government interference in economy or social evolution. So you let things be. They will work themselves out. That was the approach. That was the argument. Right? Now this approach was kind of opposed by Lester Frank Ward in American Sociology. L.F. Ward, during the Progressive Era, this period 1890 to 1920s in American history is termed as the Progressive Era. The name is here, Lester Frank Ward. So during the Progressive Era, Lester Frank Ward, his writings came to dominate American sociology. And his writings significantly challenged the views and approach of Sumner. The name of the book is Dynamic Sociology. A book he authored, Dynamic Sociology. His argument was what? His argument was that the government can and should interfere in the process of evolution, social evolution. Governments can and should interfere in the process of social evolution. According to Ward friends, the purpose of the science of society or sociology is to benefit society. The purpose of the science of society is to benefit the society. So, our task as sociologists is to encourage reforms, encourage governments to intervene in social matters, to create a better society. That is the idea. Otherwise, sociology will become a dead science, a useless science. If it has to remain relevant and useful, it has to contribute to making of a better society. So governments must be encouraged by sociologists to actively intervene in social matters and ensure improved lives for the people. How should the governments intervene? What should they do? What kind of laws? Of course, governments make laws, yeah. Somewhat like that. So, for instance, governments should provide education, ensure that the basic essentials or the basic necessities of all are met. Providing basic amenities, education, enabling opportunities, unemployment allowance, social security in general, all of that. Which kind of a state undertakes all these responsibilities? What do we call that? Welfare state. In fact, Lester Frank Ward is regarded as the father of the modern welfare state. Welfare state means that the responsibilities of the government are not merely to, maintain law and order and collect taxes for that. But its responsibility is far greater to ensure the welfare of the people. In fact, his writings influenced the administration of many American presidents. So he was responsible for the progressive era. Why is it called a progressive era? Because during this period, social reforms were undertaken in America, progressive legislation was passed, right? Basically, American state donned that welfare role during the period. There is a word he used for that, telesis. Telesis. Telesis meaning that governments can and should intervene. In fact, Lester Frank Ward, became the president of the American Sociological Society. Another important figure in American sociology was Du Bois. Du Bois. Yes. Progressive era because of the kind of policies that were undertaken that time. And yes, Lester Frank Ward was in good measure responsible for that kind of changed orientation of the American state. Okay. Another important figure was, don't talk here. Don't talk, beta. I request. Another important figure was Du Bois. Sorry? He became the president of the American Sociological Society, not America. Lester Frank Ward. Du Bois was a black sociologist and activist. One of the earliest black sociologists and activists. So his writings very graphically captured and highlighted the racial discrimination prevalent in American society. Du Bois, friends, can be regarded as the Ambedkar of America. In many ways, Like what Ambedkar is to the Dalit rights movement in India, Du Bois occupies a similar stature in the civil rights movement in US. His writings basically were quite sociological in the sense they very objectively captured the racial discrimination. On the other hand, they also were a story of pain and anguish being expressed, almost personal in that sense. Both kinds. Of growing up, living as a black in modern American society, with all the stereotypes and disprivileges and discriminations that one had to face. So these kind of writings, they were also talking about improvements and changes in society. Charlotte Gilman. Which type of sociologist? Can you guess? Charlotte, that's the hint. Feminist. हाँ, see, so cliched ना, but that's how life is. औरत है और क्या लिखेगी? So, some of the earliest expression of the feminist perspective in American sociology was through the pen of Charlotte Gilman. By the middle of the 20th century, American sociology was dominated by our very own Sri Parsons. Talcott Parsons, he is one of the scholars mentioned in our syllabus. This guy. His approach is he belongs to the functional school. Okay? Or he employs the, क्या नाम बोलते हैं, systems approach. We'll be discussing what it is. I can't get into that. Parsons' systems approach dominated American sociology. His writings were somewhat kind of, they were sought to be reformed by the writings of his student Merton, another scholar in our syllabus we'll be discussing, R.K. Merton. Sought to be somewhat challenged by the writings of Merton. So this is about the development of sociology in America. ठीक? Now we take a minute's break and then we move on to the next topic. We can have all the discussions on air conditioning if you want in this while. He is. Online students, please confirm that I'm audible. Type yes. Online students, please confirm that I'm audible. Yes, thank you. Chaliye. Yes.
The scholars of counter-enlightenment thought was not as much famous as their contemporary scholars. Also, they are supported by the elite class.
It's basically because, look at it this way, the Enlightenment project won. Na? So it said na, the history is like written by the victors. Okay? So it is Enlightenment thought which won the battle between what Enlightenment stood for and what the counter-Enlightenment guys. The counter-Enlightenment guys represented the old order. And that gave way, due to the forces of history, that gave way to the Enlightenment developments. Okay? And hence,
It's the Martin who challenged the Parsons writing.
sorry?
Martin challenged the Parsons writing.
Somewhat reformed them, questioned some of his assumptions, and yes, so Merton kind of improved upon what Parsons said. Chaliye, moving on to a new this thing. So we are done with emergence of sociology. We've also discussed what kind of questions we get there. Okay, moving on to sociology as a science. So tell me, friends, before we discuss, write, or teach, I want your intuitive sense. What is your gut feel? Is sociology a science? And don't say just because we have, used some definitions or we have discussed how the founding fathers called it a science. What is your gut feel? Independent thinking, irrespective of the founding, what the founding fathers would have said. Okay, is sociology a scientific subject? Can we have a consensus that it doesn't seem scientific? How many of you are of the personal opinion that sociology is not scientific? Intuitively, how many of you think it is scientific? Why do you say that? Apart from that, because, Comte said it. Sorry?
When it is problem is arise in the society, we try to find the solution. And whenever we find the solution, then it becomes science.
So anything that's looking for a solution is science, you say? That's not at all satisfactory. So we have data, that is the basis, so that is why it is scientific. Chaliye, tell me, 1 second. If in school you had a subject called sociology, you did in fact, you didn't only know, you didn't know. Okay? Which subjects were considered as science? Undoubtedly. Physics, chemistry, bio. Would sociology lie with these or another kind of subjects? Where? Science or commerce or arts? Yes, social science. Okay. Now tell me, what do you understand? Why do we call physics, chemistry and bio? Let's try to understand what is science and then we can perhaps better comment whether sociology is a science or not. Right? So what is it about physics, chemistry or bio that makes them undisputedly science? They are natural. Natural in what sense? Yeah? Don't speak like in a cacophony. Raise your hands. Yes. Objectivity. Huh? Okay. Objectivity and generalizing laws. Absolutely. Yes. Universal truths and facts. Huh? These are very heavy words. They carry their own weight. No? When you declare something to be a fact, it is incontrovertible. It is beyond question. Huh? So that is the nature of science. It is based on facts or empirical data. It formulates universal generalizations. H2 plus half O2, H2O. Whether in India, America, Arabia, anywhere you go. It is universal truth. That is the beauty or the nature of a science. It is objective, he said. What do you mean by objective? Without prejudice. So if a man mixes H2 plus half O2, what will he get? H2O. And if a woman does it? If upper caste does it? And a lower caste does it? American? Pakistani? So point is, irrespective of the social background, irrespective of the value preferences, irrespective of the ideological commitments, gender, caste, class, nationality, that truth remains the same. Yes or no? The conclusions of that research project or that scientific project are not changed by who the guy doing it is. What else is the nature of science? What springs to your mind automatically when you hear the word science? Just give me these keywords like he did. Objectivity, universal, experiment. Yes, we conduct. What is an experiment? Trials. Okay, but can we do better than that? Observations you make during experiments, but what is an experiment? Yes? Makes life easy. Shastriya Sangeet may make somebody's life easy, but is that science? You can? It can be proved, QED, hence proved. Huh? Yes, that is the nature of science. Sorry? We reach a conclusion. But we can do otherwise also, non-scientifically. So say that, we reach objective conclusions. Objectivity is the hallmark. Reaching conclusions isn't. Anyone can reach any conclusion, any which way. What else? Sorry? Systematic. So you reach, there's universality to the truth. It is characterized by objectivity. We conduct experiments. Experiments basically mean a controlled environment in which you would vary one variable and see its effect on the other, keeping other things constant. Broadly? Yeah? You have empirical data or facts, incontrovertible truths, right? These are the hallmarks of science. Now try to evaluate sociology on the touchstone of these. Permit me a bit of Hindi. क्या sociology इन मापदंडों पे खरा उतरता है? Can it be considered a science on an objective evaluation based on these parameters? Can we arrive at universal truths in sociology? Is it objective? Is it facts based? Can we conduct experiments? So what is our sense now? Is it scientific or not? I have deliberately not given you any answers but raised certain questions to set your minds thinking. Okay? We have to together try to arrive at that understanding of whether it is scientific or not. Intuitively, it seems on many of the parameters of what constitutes a science, sociology seems to be lacking, very frankly. Yet, the founding fathers were crystal clear in their minds that sociology is indeed a scientific discipline. It is nothing but a science, according to the founding fathers. Comte went to the extent of terming sociology as the queen science, scienceon ki rani. He said, really, he created a hierarchy of sciences and said physics, chemistry, bio are lower sciences. And sociology he placed on the top. So he was so crystal clear in his writings, in his mind, that sociology is a scientific discipline. So likho. What is a science? Give a heading, sociology as a science, question mark. Then a subheading, what is a science? Science refers to a systematized body of knowledge Science refers to a systematized body of knowledge based on empirical evidence. Full stop. Science formulates generalizations or laws to establish cause and effect relationships, to explain the phenomena under study. A discipline can be regarded as scientific or can be regarded as a science. ऐसे लिखो, a discipline can be regarded as a science if it uses which method? Huh? The scientific method. I know you are thinking कि sir हमें तो मना करते हो to explain, but we'll be explaining further what is the meaning of this scientific method. If it uses the scientific method, full stop. The scientific method involves, you tell me, what does it involve? Have you guys used the scientific method? Yes or no? All engineers and none of you have used the scientific method. Huh? Even non-engineers have used the scientific method way back in schools. What is the scientific method, for God's sake? Experiments. Characterized by objectivity, that's fine, but what is the scientific method? What do you do in a scientific? Where do you get data from? How do you conduct experiments? Straight away, you go and mix hydrogen and chlorine. Sorry? What laws will you apply? Yeah? How do you conduct an experiment, for God's sake, in your science labs? Huh? Tell me, what are the steps? Aim, yes, then? Yeah, aim, objective. Okay, theory. Procedure, okay. Then, kind of the things used, beaker and all that you'll write. Then, you conduct the experiment. Then, okay, precautions you'll write, but then you conduct the experiment, you collect data. You collect data. Or you make observations. Then what do? You process the data. Right? You may compartmentalize or classify it into certain categories, compare, whatever, and then you arrive at a conclusion or a result. This is the scientific method. So, likho. The scientific method involves conducting experiments in a controlled environment, in pursuit of a clear objective, comma, make observations, accurate observations, comma, data processing, and arriving at a cause-effect relationship or a generalization, right? Sorry?
If it's the generalization, then how it's justifying the objectivity?
I didn't understand your question.
You said that the last
See, controlled means... No, controlled means that you have to be very clear which variables you want to find out the relationship between. And if you want to find out the relationship between two variables, other variables have to be kept constant. Only then can you vary one and see its effect on the other. That is what we mean, na? In a controlled environment. For example, if you are seeing, what is the effect on a plant growth if water is added or a particular micronutrient is added to the soil. Then other variables like heat and light and the ambient temperature, all those have to be kept constant. And only then you can say, okay, other things remaining constant, when I added more micronutrients A, then this was the effect. And that doesn't compromise objectivity, because that is built into the objective of the experiment. That is what we are trying to find out in the first place. So where was I? That following steps. One important aspect is missing. What? In these steps. One very important step. In fact, it is that step which gives science the chore that it has. What is chore in English? The audacity to claim, complete monopoly over the truth. Science claims that it is true knowledge and only it is true knowledge. Why? Sorry? What? Hypothesis is tentative. Yeah. Hypothesis is... Absolutely. So you don't have to take... If I conduct an experiment, do you have to accept it? Whatever my results are? No. You can always question. You can always challenge. So my experiment, my results will be considered as true knowledge only if and only as long as they can be verified by the other and the third and the 10th. Yes or no? So it is verifiable. Verification is a very important aspect of the scientific project. In fact, when you are conducting experiments in your college or school labs, you are now discovering the laws. The laws were discovered by a Newton, you are only verifying it. See, still force is directly proportional to acceleration. Right? Scientific knowledge is subject to verification. Tell me, do these scientific experiments or projects, research, do they create laws governing the natural world or discover them? Did Newton create force is equal to mass into acceleration? Or was force is equal to mass into acceleration even before Newton stated as much? So Newton only discovered the law which was in operation anyways in nature. Right? Please appreciate. So science doesn't create laws or whatever, it only discovers them. The presumption is that the natural world is governed by certain laws. And through experimentation, empirical evidence, we can discover these laws which govern the natural world. Right? Please write down. Science frequently formulates laws that claim, that have universal application. Scientific laws have universal application, or the laws discovered by science have universal application. Scientific or science, just write science. Why scientific? Science is objective. That is, i.e., it is not affected by who the researcher is. Not affected by who the researcher is. Science is characterized by empiricism. Skepticism, and rationality. What do you mean by skepticism? Yes, that you must doubt, you must question, not accept things at face value, or not accept something simply because it has been told to you. This is in stark contrast to which other source of knowledge? Another very important source of knowledge in human history. Religion. Religious knowledge is, frequently beyond question or debate. It has to be accepted as it is taught. Are you with me? So religion does not encourage the kind of questioning attitude that science does. Can you question what is written in the Bhagavad Gita or the Holy Quran? It will be blasphemous. You will be prohibited. You will be condemned. You would have sinned. Yes or no? In contrast, no matter how great a scientist, if he is a Nobel laureate, if he is the founding father of modern science, like a Newton or a Kepler, can you question them? They never claim finality. They never claim that you have to accept it because so and so said it, or it is written in this or that book. Yes or no? Science is always open to questioning, to criticism, to modification. So if you have to modify what Newton said, what do you have to do? You have to prove him wrong. Based on what? How will you prove him wrong? Empirical data. So you conduct experiments which show that no, force is inversely proportional to acceleration, and we will replace Newton's laws with Webber's laws. Right? So there is no finality. There is no, science is always characterized by that spirit of skepticism and questioning. Now give a subheading, Sociology as a science. Now friends, though on the face of it, it seems that sociology is not scientific, the founding fathers were crystal clear in their minds, in their writings, that sociology is scientific. It is nothing but a science. And this view that sociology is a scientific discipline is known as positivism. It is known as positivism. So give the subheading positivism. Write down, dash. Positivism is a philosophy that sociology is a scientific discipline. But friends, why? We need to understand the logic. We'll write further, but first let's understand why. Why does a Comte, who is the founding father of sociology, he was also the founder of positivism. So he established sociology as a positive scientific discipline. What is his thought? Now, why do you think sociology is not scientific? From Comte's perspective, friends, please appreciate, quite similar to a physics or chemistry, similarly in sociological research, our conclusions are based on empirical data. If you want to find out the objective truth about the society, it has to be based on data, statistics. Statistics don't change. Statistics don't lie, depending on the predisposition of the researcher. For example, say caste. It's a very touchy issue in India. Now, if I were to analyze caste relations in a village or in a region in India, one way I could go about it was I can collect empirical data about land ownership by members of different castes. Now, if the data reveals, hypothetical situation, that 70% of the land is owned by the Brahmins, 25% of the land is owned by the intermediate castes, and only 5% of the total land is owned by the Dalits. Now, irrespective of whatever is my own caste, my ideological position, so whether I am a Brahmin researcher or a Dalit researcher, the data will remain the same. Yes or no? The data won't change. Land ownership data I can get objectively from the official records, from the government village record keeper, the Patwari. And that data remains the same, irrespective of whether it is a Brahmin or a Dalit, whether it is an Ambedkarite or a Savarkarite. Who is the researcher? So who the researcher is simply doesn't matter. Quite in a similar way, whether H2 plus half O2, a man is doing it or a woman is doing it. Upper caste or lower caste is doing it. So, sociological research, being based on empirical data, is characterized by the same kind of objectivity as research in physics, chemistry, bio. Also appreciate, friends, from the perspective of the positivists, social life, human behavior, are they arbitrary and whimsical? Or do they follow a certain pattern? We have discussed this earlier. Follows a pattern. Just like nature follows a certain pattern. What does the physicist or the chemist does? It identifies those underlying laws or patterns. Yes or no? And formulates them in the form of a generalization that force is inversely directly proportional to acceleration. Similarly, we sociologists can also discover the patterns underlying human behavior, underlying social life, and formulate generalizations. What do we do once we formulate these laws in science, in physics or chemistry? What is the purpose or utility? Now that we know force is equal to mass into acceleration, what do we do with this knowledge? What is that application? What can we do? We use this knowledge to predict future outcome. In other words, now that we know force is equal to mass into acceleration, so we know that if there is a mass of object, an object of mass m, and we apply a force F, then how much acceleration will be produced. Then we can use it to make cars or this or that. Yes or no? In other words, we can apply this knowledge to predict future outcome. Similarly, in social life we can predict future outcome. If we understand or uncover the laws governing social life. Sounds too ambitious a claim? One may counter-argue with Comte, that human beings aren't like that. Human beings are unique. Human beings are emotional. I have my own emotions, my own meanings, my own feelings. But a Comte would tell you bluntly that to hell with your feelings. They don't matter, really. Whatever you may feel on the inside, you may think on the inside, whatever emotions you may have, your behavior, the observable, externally observable behavior, will or does follow the laws laid down by the society. You may feel like a woman inside, but you will wear the clothes of a man. Why? Because the laws of the society have laid it down as such. And how do we identify those laws? By collecting empirical data. Data tells us. For example, if you collect empirical data about Indian society, I'm giving you a hypothetical example. You may figure out that, by the age of 32, 98% of all Indian men are married. Based on this empirical data, we can predict by the age of 30 or whatever, there's a 98% likelihood of a person, Indian man, getting married to a person of the opposite gender and the same caste. Whatever. You can find out through empirical data. Now, you may not want to get married, but you will. You observe it around you. I have done it like anecdotally. Whenever a person reaches a marriageable age, he says, "Mujhe nahi karni shadi." But then he does succumb to the social forces which are outside and beyond his control. And he ends up getting married within a year or two. समझ रहे हो आप? And this law generally holds. Exceptions like UPSC aspirants may be there. Okay? But point is that that behavior of man is not whimsical, arbitrary, or of one's own choosing simply. It is governed by social forces which are outside and beyond the individual. So only if we can understand or discover, we meaning the researchers, the sociologists, if we can discover what are the patterns governing human behavior, we can predict how the next guy will behave or the direction in which society is moving. Agreed with Comte? Likho. Positivism, dash. Positivism is a philosophy. Have we written something? Yes, then tell me now. One person, yes. That's it? Okay, full stop. Positivism, yeah, ऐसे लिखो. Comte, in his book, A Course in Positive Philosophy, considers that the same scientific method which is applied in the physical sciences can also be applied to study society. sociological research is based on what? Empirical data. Why is it called positivism? I'm asking you. You should have asked, but since you didn't, I'm asking you. Why is it called positivism? What's positive in it? Huh? It affirms sociology as a science. It's trying to find solutions. That's, novel.
Above all sciences. Above all the sciences.
Above. So what's positive about that? Sorry? It doesn't follow natural law. It says society follows certain laws. Social life follows certain laws. Yes? Correct.
Scientific methods are regarded as positive, and that is why it is called positive.
What do you mean scientific methods are considered positive?
They are based on certain laws.
You see, it's not the English word positive. The word positivism is based on the French word positif. Please write down. The term positivism is क्या बोलेंगे? Derived from the French word positif, meaning imposed on the mind by experience. Imposed on the mind by experience. Imposed on the mind by experience. Full stop. Thus, positivism holds that only true knowledge is that which is based on sensory experience or empirical evidence. Based on sensory experience or empirical evidence. Full stop. Some of the main principles of positivism are as follows. Some of the main principles of positivism are as follows. First, unity of the scientific method. Unity of the scientific method. Means what? Dash. That the same scientific, which we have discussed already, the same scientific method can be used across sciences, whether natural sciences or social sciences. Okay? If you want to rewrite, you may. Unity of the scientific method. Second, the objective of scientific inquiry is to explain the phenomena under study. Explain the phenomena under study, comma, develop generalizations or laws. Develop generalizations or laws which can be used to predict future outcome. Which can be used to predict future outcome. Third, scientific knowledge can be tested empirically. Can be tested empirically. Which is self-explanatory, I would say. Yeah. Fourth, that scientific knowledge should not be colored by the value preferences or prejudices of who? The researcher. Next para. According to positivists, human behavior is not arbitrary. Full stop. It is constrained by the wider social forces. Full stop. In sociological research, we can empirically capture hello. I am back. In sociological research, we can empirically capture and quantify human behavior to uncover underlying patterns. Full stop. Just like the chemist or the physicist, the sociologist also collects data about the social world through experimentation or observation. Full stop. Like the chemist or the physicist, the sociologist also keeps his own value preferences aside and lets data. Okay, I'll slow down. I thought you guys are in a hurry. I repeat, like the physicist or the chemist, the sociologist also, what did I say after that? Keeps his value preferences aside and lets data guide his research. Therefore, the value orientation of the researcher, is inconsequential. Basically, it's immaterial, inconsequential in sociological research. Therefore, the value orientation of the researcher is inconsequential. Comte, in his hierarchy of sciences, places sociology. Comte, in his hierarchy of sciences, places sociology above physics, chemistry, and biology, and terms it as a queen science, the most complex of all sciences. The most complex of all sciences. And we are done for the day. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. I am still here if any of you has anything to discuss.